you probably say yes to more things than you should. I've now learned when to say no and also to set more boundaries in terms of clients and the hours I work for them. So they probably had cash flow problems where their cash is just tied up in inventory, or they just have way too much in stock and they're having warehouse issues. And I always tell people that is a symptom of the problem. You really need to fix the...
Bellamy Grindl is an inventory and merchandising strategist who's helped consumer brands unlock serious growth. With 15 plus years of experience from startups to Fortune 500 companies, she's the go-to expert for scaling smart.
With providers, you both have to opt in, make sure you're both aligned on what you want out of it. And so that's been nice, especially as I am researching those tools for clients.
I did see that ChatGPT added the whole shopping experience feature now. I was like, okay, might as well use ChatGPT and say, what are the best options? And then I tell them my price point.
I think the price point is a really interesting one because...
Hey guys out there, thank you for tuning in. My name is Alan Chen, CEO of FreeCashflow.io, and welcome to Profit Powerhouse, the podcast where we sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs to cover the secret behind their success. We're here to learn what drives their growth, the challenges they overcome, and how they master their finances. Our goal, to help you achieve the same success while maximizing your profit. Let's dive in. Today's guest is a powerhouse in the world of retail and e-commerce strategy. Bellamy Grindl, with over 17 years of experience leading growth for major players like Walmart, Gap, and Guild.com, Bellamy has built a career around helping consumers brand scale smartly and sustainably. She's mastered merchandising, planning, and analytics, having launched multi-million-dollar brands, optimized complex inventory systems, and guided business from scrappy startups to enterprise powerhouse. As the founder of Retailytics, LLC, Bellamy now partners with brands to make data-driven decisions more approachable and actionable, helping them boost sales, streamline operations, and reduce inventory liability. Her work is reshaping the future of retail, and she's been recognized as a top retail influencer by RETHINK Retail. Whether she's consulting, mentoring, or advising, Bellamy brings clarity and strategy as an industry that's constantly evolving. Get ready to dive into the insight of one of retail's sharpest minds. Bellamy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, just to get us started, can you share a little bit more about your background and what inspired you to start your business?
Yes. So I have been in retail mostly on the planning side. So for those of you that aren't familiar with consumer goods businesses, usually within larger organizations, there are planning teams and buying teams that essentially tell you how much inventory to buy to fulfill demand. So I've always been on the inventory planning side of things. I usually tell people that's sort of like the FP&A of fashion. We usually work pretty closely with the finance teams. So after having worked for many businesses, did get the startup bug, and I really loved working for startups. And I realized that I was doing a little bit of the same thing for every company that I was working with, usually working with $50 million brands, helping them set up their demand planning, as well as merchandising and data analytics. I've also leaned a little bit heavier into data recently, just because in order to do your buying and planning effectively, you really need to have good data, trash in, trash out.
Definitely.
So really setting up those frameworks for data governance and to make sure your data is correct in order to do those operations.
That makes a lot of sense. Everything's data-driven these days.
Yes.
Was there a pivotal moment in your journey when you decided that this is gonna work, right? This journey I'm on, or this trend I'm on, is gonna really launch my business?
I really think it took a couple of, I had a series of startups that I worked for. Having been in the startup world, that success is not necessarily always guaranteed. So I worked for several startups, probably three within the course of about 3 years, and then realized that people would ask me all the time if I could do this service for them. And I never really thought about consulting. So probably about the last year of my full-time job was when I really got serious about it. And then my last company I was with actually went out of business. So that was a little bit of the impetus to really get me started. But I haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. I mean, was there a particular strategy that really propelled your growth recently?
I think networking definitely. I mean, I think a lot of consultants, they describe it as feast or famine. But if you are always networking and always talking to people, even if your pipeline is completely full, that strategy has really helped me because you never know where your next lead is going to come from. And I personally, I'm not into the sales pitch and I don't like to do that. So I feel like as long as I'm networking, then I really don't have to do the sales pitch and I'm one able to meet more interesting people. I think if you reframe the networking lens, because I consider myself slightly an introvert. And so, especially before going into consulting and being more client based, networking was something I really didn't do. And it's definitely a muscle that, it's a little awkward, but once you get over it, it's much easier to do and you get better at it over time.
Yeah, definitely. And being an introvert and going into sales usually not something that clash too well together, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that you're using more networking and word of mouth to kind of spread the good word of your brand. Is there a particular audience segment that you guys really go after? I didn't know you mentioned like the 50 million mark is kind of a sweet spot for you guys.
Yes, so definitely consumer brands selling any physical product. And then also I do some advising for technology that supports retail, so anything like retail SaaS. And then I've found out through trial and error that I guess the sweet spot for my companies are probably around the 20 million plus mark.
20
At
mil
that
plus.
point, they've understood or probably experienced a lot of the problems where they understand the return on investment that someone like me will bring in. So they've probably had cash flow problems where their cash is just tied up in inventory, or they just have way too much in stock and they're having warehouse issues. Or on the other side of things, they can't keep something in stock. And I always tell people that is a symptom of the problem. You really need to fix the process that leads to that to impact your buying and planning decisions earlier in the pipeline.
That makes a lot of sense, Bellamy. And I know with the current economic landscape, this is probably a very hot topic right now, right? I'm sure your services are very much in demand around a lot of e-commerce brands out there. How do you deal with some of the difficulties right now in the economic landscape for these retail brands and e-commerce in general?
I mean, the tariffs, it's definitely a hot topic in my world. It all comes down to cash flow. A lot of these brands they don't have the cash flow reserves in order to pay for these tariffs. So I'd say right now, a lot of people are going through the exercises to look at pricing architecture. Does their pricing make sense? To be honest, many of them probably don't even have an actual architecture in place. So when you're looking at relative pricing, does it make sense? They're looking at their good, better, best strategy. Do they have an opening price point for that consumer that is a little bit more price conscious? Or a medium price point and then a higher end price point. And then I also think it's about communicating the value on the website. You can't just slap a premium price point on something without telling the consumer why they're paying for it. So I think a
Exactly.
lot of people are doing a little bit more analysis on the product description page, the PDP, to make sure they're communicating that value either through reviews that are saying, it's a 4-star or 5-star product, as well as better imagery showing the consumer what they're paying for, and then highlighting maybe some sustainable manufacturing methods or highlighting more about the fabric itself to make sure you're communicating that value.
I would love to dive a little bit deeper into that, right? So right now, a lot of folks are just worried and concerned about just everyday staples, right? Like in the grocery store of eggs and bread and going up in price. So they're like, well, how do you convince them to pay even more money for maybe things that are not really needs but wants, right? And what has really been like the highlight or the star of a message that you're kind of guiding and teaching these e-commerce leaders to say like you should say this or you should mention this that's really going to resonate with the audience.
Yeah, I do think it really depends on the type of product that you are selling. Most companies will have a loss leader. For example, if you're going to a grocery store, you realize or you remember the price of milk. So they will have milk priced at a more, I guess, affordable price point, hoping you'll spend more on that basket analysis. So that's the same thing for consumer goods and apparel online. You'll have a loss leader. You may be sharper price point on that basic that's coming in. And then you are communicating the value for those other items. I think it also comes down to conversion rate optimization. So if you're working, I mean, either you're doing this manually or you're working with an app that does this, that does a lot of cross sells and upsells. But I think right now it's really appealing to more of the emotional sense of what people want because like fragrance right now is doing really well. It used to be the lipstick effect in beauty when
Oh,
economics were bad, people would still buy lipstick because it was still something that could make you feel better and you felt like you were being fancy. That's actually shifted more to fragrance right now. Fragrance is doing so well because I think it has that emotional lift and that, I guess, immediate sense of relief that you get from the fragrance and finding those ways to appeal to the consumer that way.
I definitely learned a lot more about the changing trend right now, right? From lipsticks to fragrance. And I think I'm getting older in age, so I feel that way too. Like I love scented candles now, right?
Hmm.
You light one up, they have a great sense to it, makes you feel
Yeah.
relaxed and stress free. So anytime I get an advertisement on that, I'm like, yeah, I probably have to get one of those. Right. And I see the emotional appeal you're talking about. Yeah. And then talking about loss leaders, that's a great point, right? I think Costco is one of the best example of that, right? They use a lot of loss leaders to get people in the store. The rotisserie chicken is a big seller. They never raise the price on that, but they'll put it all in the back of their store, right? Knowing that you have to walk through all the other products just to get to it, right? So I think that's a great strategy and retail strategy I've been trying through over the years. What key factors do you feel has been helpful for you to kind of like optimize and keep your clients happy, right? As this economy kind of shift, and I know a lot of agencies face similar pressure, clients start questioning, am I getting enough value for my service that I'm paying for, right? Should I be asking for a discount? Do you face these challenges for your clients?
I think it comes down to numbers. So I'd say definitely for myself as well as other apps that I'm suggesting, if you're able to communicate the value that you're bringing. So, for example, for me, I'll run the numbers and say, we actually bought in a more strategic way the past year, we actually saved X or $250,000 in receipts. So that's an immediate cost that they see in receipt savings, but then also margin expansion. If you're buying tighter and you're driving more scarcity on the consumer side, you'll have less markdowns. So you should see both a margin rate and margin dollar expansion if you are buying better. A lot of people are trying to discount less, and usually that can only happen if you're buying in a more strategic way and you have less inventory.
That makes sense. It sounds like you're bringing true and really measurable value to your client base, right? To make sure that they know what you're bringing to the table. And then can you kind of talk about, a lot of people are like, hey, it must be easy to start a consulting firm. I probably will be working like an hour a day at Moe's and I'll be sitting on the beach the rest of the time. Is that true from your perspective? Do you feel like you're working more or less than, when you own your own business than when you're like, grinding it out 9 to 5? Uh-huh.
Definitely depends on the type of client. I've learned that the type of client and the types of people I like to work with, also the types of projects. I'd say in the beginning, as you're building your confidence as a consultant, you probably say yes to more things than you should. I've now learned when to say no and also to set more boundaries in terms of clients and the hours I work for them, just so I am setting aside enough time for both my clients as well as myself.
Would you tell people out there who's inspiring or aspiring to be like agency owners or even in your space to say, yes, you should come in. I invite you in because this is much better than my 9 to 5. Or you're like, no, unless you're like truly like, passionate about it, stay out. Yeah.
I will say, I remember in the beginning, which I was so scared to do, and you read enough about this online, people who have gotten to the other side and they're just like, I wish I did it sooner. I wish I did it sooner.
Okay.
And
Got it.
it is the fear of failing, which can be a pretty big barrier to entry. But I will say, once you find your niche, and that does take some time, like I've definitely counseled many people that are looking to go fractional or become a consultant, and I can tell them my lessons all day long, but sometimes you just need to learn it yourself in order to go through that and grow from it. But I will say, there are certain things that are a harder barrier to entry, like the networking, for example. If you're not comfortable asking for business or talking pricing, things like that, you're gonna need to get comfortable with it. And then, I've also explored some other things in the beginning, like working for other agencies. Like I did some consulting projects under other companies as I was getting my feet wet to sort of just see how the industry worked before fully going out 100% on my own.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure there's other, introverted type of folks out there, right? That says, I'm too gonna be too shy to do all that networking and things like that. Is there any approach for, those type of people out there to say like how do they, break the mold or break their way of thinking of, expanding their network, right? That's a scary term for introverts out there.
So I think there's a couple things that I found later that I would recommend if I had access to them sooner. One is called Lunch Club. It's a
Oh,
weekly networking tool you can use. It's invite only. If anyone wants an invite, I can send you one. But they match you with people depending on your interests and your skill set. And that's easy and not high, I guess, not really a risk because usually it's virtual. So it can be pretty quick where if you vibe, you can go longer. And that's been nice to meet people, especially since I'm newer to California. I've been trying to build my network out here. And then, I mean, I've also been surprised how many people I just reached out to cold on LinkedIn. Now, I will say New York is a different animal than California. New York people do not respond, but everyone in California has been like,
Friendlier, huh? No, that makes a lot of sense. New York, if you're just walking on the street, you just kind of heads down, bumping into them and not saying excuse me, and just walk past them,
yeah.
right? So I get the different vibe between the coasts there. No, that makes a lot of sense. And then just curious, Bellamy, do you attend kind of like the in-person conferences at all? Like retail
A
conferences,
little bit.
e-commerce conferences, that type?
Usually I'm going on behalf of a client to research different retail SaaS for them, either like merchandising tools, demand planning tools, or there's a whole host of other things. So usually I'm going on behalf of a client. There are like huge ones like NRF, which is a behemoth, and I tend to like the smaller ones that are a little bit more engaging and not as intimidating. And there's a lot of events around where I've personally found as a consultant, I actually connect more with the providers that are there. So both on a partnership level, but then also finding tools that I can recommend for my clients. I'm doing that research, finding out what works in terms of budget, tech stack, and where they are at their stage of their business and making meaningful connections there. That's also been a fruitful way to get more clients for me too.
Yeah, I find it helpful. I attended Shop Talk 2 years ago in Vegas, right? It took place at Mandalay Bay, was like this huge convention center that they have there, right? Got a lot of free swag, which is great. But they also had this section that you kind of talk about, 'cause similar to your lunch club, right? Where you kind of have like a little matching interests and
Yep.
what you're looking to get out there. Then they just sit you down on this little, one-on-one tables all
Oh,
over. And then
nice.
after 15 minutes, you kind of just rotate through, so you get to meet like 3 to 4 founders or leaders or even people who are just supporting the business e-commerce
Oh,
side,
that's
right?
nice. Yeah, I'm going to the Lead Summit in New York
Oh, nice.
later this month, and I actually went last year. It was really nice, but it was really great because they sort of do speed dating with providers. You both have to opt in, make sure you're both aligned on what you want out of it. And so that's been nice, especially as am researching those tools for clients.
Awesome. Get to meet more friendly New York people over
Yeah.
there.
Okay, I was a New Yorker for 15 years.
No, I like to joke about it because I'm my parents are from Brooklyn, New York, also.
Okay.
Yeah, so I understand how it is. But I'm used to the California lifestyle now,
Yeah,
right? Sunny days, friendlier
yeah,
people, right? So I'm like always funny when someone mention New York and how the contrast, right, and
yeah,
difference is. Bellamy, how do you kind of stay motivated when and focused when things get tough, right? There's always, especially in the consulting business, there's always high tide, low tide as far as
yeah.
client retention and acquisition. Is there a period in time where you feel like you're at the lowest point in the consulting agency, but it has always been smooth sailing so far?
So there's definitely highs and lows. I'd say for me, things that keep me motivated, and this is another thing that I'd recommend for people just starting out. When you feel like you're not getting wins, I'm definitely a person that likes to-do lists. I would set goals of how many people that I should network with on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. So you'd at least feel like, hey, I'm getting that win. I met with 3 people. Maybe nothing is coming from it now, but I did that and I'm still doing all the things in order to make it happen. And I will say, like in the beginning, I probably networked with probably 200 people. And that's not even new people. That's people within my own network. Like I've been in retail my entire career, but not everyone's on LinkedIn. Not everyone's on the socials. So they don't know what you're doing. I mean, I'd say most people aren't on LinkedIn. It's just sitting down with the people you actually know and be like, this is what I'm doing now. Either one, I'd love your feedback, your input, or is there someone that you can introduce me to? Another thing I would also do is when someone said no to me, I'd be like, "That's fine. Can you introduce me to someone who you think would need my services?" So turn that don't a no isn't just a flat no. You can turn it into an introduction.
Turn that no into 5 yeses down the line, right?
Yeah,
Just because I talked to this one no person, which was
right.
always very smart. And yeah, your network of, just like you mentioned, just 200 people can become thousands, right? Due to the system that you just introduced there. Great, yeah. And I would like to turn attention right now to kind of like the buzzword of the century almost, it feels like, right? AI, right? Would love to know how you have kind of introduced AI in possibly your work and maybe introduce AI to the work of your clients.
So there's definitely things, especially from a retail operations standpoint, where I think AI is incredible. So a lot of what I do is I create what I call like an item master to help people enrich their data so they can get more from it instead of just top line sales. What are they doing in t-shirts? Well, what are you doing in cotton t-shirts? What are you doing in short sleeve
Hmm.
t-shirts? Really need to get really detailed into that. And as one person to manage that, that can be quite manual. But if you can get data AI to analyze that data to enrich it for you, especially for massive data sets where you have huge product catalogs. That is a huge unlock. But then also the different retail SaaS platforms that are also using AI. So you can, in sort of free form speech, ask something like, what are items that are often sold together? Basket analysis is one of those things that is really hard to do on a manual level. And so if you're able to ask AI to quickly analyze all of that for you and then suggest bundles for you to help you increase your AOV, that's a big one. And I'd say almost every platform I'm looking at right now is using AI at some point. I also use it a lot personally for tone. Unfortunately, a lot of what I do, I am the bearer of bad news saying, you shouldn't buy this, you need to kill this collection, you don't have money to do this. Sometimes, depending on the client, I need to use it for tone to help soften the blow of some of my no's.
That's funny. Yes, I think AI has been used a ton for those kind of news I don't want to deliver situations, right? It's like,
Yeah.
hey, I really don't want to tell this person this. Can you make it so that they take it in the best way possible? I've seen some really funny memes on Facebook saying, I really don't want to write this condolence letter. Can you do it for me? And then it writes this super flowery, beautiful letter and even include like a haiku at the end to
Yeah.
say like to express their feelings. I was like, wow. Even the best poet probably can't come up with this in the world. No, that immediately makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean AI is just so powerful and so part of everyday life right now. Do you see that? Where do you see that trending going in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you see it being even more integrated, fading out? Like what direction do
I
we
mean, I
tend to see
definitely
it?
think it's interesting. I'm not sure if you saw the news recently how ChatGPT was integrating with Shopify checkout feature. So what's really interesting is how you won't even have to visit a website in order to check out. So I think it'll be really interesting from a shopping perspective. Instead of going to all your favorite websites, you can just ask ChatGPT, I'm looking for the best basic black tea, show me the three, and you be able to check out. Or for example, the other day, instead of manually doing research on competitors, I was like, what are the competitors to this three? What are they priced at? What are the benefits to each of them? So I think just being able to condense a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I definitely don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. It's going to be more integrated in everyday life.
I can definitely see that. I did see that ChatGPT added the whole shopping experience feature now where you could just type
Right.
in, hey, I'm looking for this. Can you go search the web for the best of this, right? Like I needed a coffee table because my
Mhm.
cat jumped on our current one and broke it. So I was like, okay, might as well use ChatGPT and say, what are the best options? And then I tell them my price point, I tell them where I am, and it just
I think the price point is a really interesting one because that is usually what people are looking for.
Mhm.
They want it to fit within a certain price
Right.
threshold. And even for like I was looking at it for recently for travel. Like now that I'm not out of a major airport,
Mhm.
I mean San Diego's still international, but it's not
Yeah.
like a major airport. Travel's much harder. So it's like how can I make this the most cost effective and the most time effective traveling from this airport to plan a trip abroad this summer. I think it'll be really interesting for that specific reason, just looking at price.
No, that's a good idea, Bellamy. We're trying to go to Japan as a family in November, so I think I should ask ChatGPT for advice, right, on that first to kind of plan out my itinerary and make sure we're getting the best pricing every step of the way. So you're closer to San Diego Airport than LAX? Is that what's happening here and what to make the decision easier?
I mean,
Okay,
sometimes I fly out of LA just because they have more times, but
yeah, but it's also a busier airport, right?
yeah.
Harder to navigate through, so San Diego is probably better for that. It makes a lot of sense. And then what would you kind of advise e-commerce brands out there of like what's the best way for them to integrate AI into their everyday business, right? Because there's so many solutions out there. Everyone basically is now like an AI agency of some sort, right?
Right.
And an AI tool of some sort. So it's kind of confusing in a way, right? Where there's too many options because everyone kind of rebranded themselves as some sort of AI front face sing company. Like how do they distinguish the good ones versus the bad ones, or kind of like that?
I think right now you can get a fair amount out of just ChatGPT and the free version. You can start there. I mean, I even asked ChatGPT, compare these system, which one's going to give me the most value based on XYZ. There's also a lot of prompts that you can OpenAI prompts that you can look at that'll help you configure your prompt in a way which you'll get more out of the response. I definitely think it's more about learning how to prompt the model so you get what you want out of it. Yes, everyone has AI, but I do think understanding what your goals and what you want out of it first. So I don't know. Right now, it's just sort of trial and error to see what's working, I think, right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are probably underutilizing the power that's
Mhm,
within, these AI systems and ChatGPT. Like, I know some folks are like replacing their like therapists with
mhm,
ChatGPT. They just set up like a custom GPT, give it like
mhm,
the most detailed prompt ever. It says, guide my life, right?
mhm.
And some are like, I don't need a personal trainer anymore. I'm just gonna use ChatGPT as my personal trainer. It's gonna give me a day by day what I should be doing, what set I should be doing, encouraging me, right? Because you can set like schedule reminders now, right? And do ChatGPT say, hey, every day at 7 a.m., tell me this, right? So yeah, there's a lot of I say possibilities out there for folks to explore. And I think e-commerce brands are kind of losing out if they're not like integrating it into part of life, part of my opinion. So
But I do think for all the hype right now, it's not as like, I would like to know how integrated it is from a percent standpoint, because the stat that always throws me is how e-commerce is still such a small slice of the pie compared to total retail. And we think, especially as people who work with e-commerce brands every day, it's like everyone shops online. They don't.
yeah, that's why I think like when you're on like shows like Shark Tank, right? They always were
Yeah.
like, oh, I need to break into retail because they kind of like realize that in order to get in front of even more millions of eyes, they need to be somewhere in Walmart, right, or Target, right, for the brand to really be nationwide known and all that stuff, right? Whereas in the world of e-commerce, if you're not like constantly, you know, throwing ads out there and putting it in people's eyeballs, they scroll through like social media,
Mhm.
you get lost, right, in the wave of new brands and new items that get started out there. Where, if you're in Walmart, people know your brand, right? People know you're there and you're around.
But I also think that will be interesting to see how AI changes that, specifically for the shopping feature. Because if you're not running ads and you are getting lost in the shuffle, how are you optimizing for ChatGPT to pick you up? And it's sort of like the bots against the bots. Like, are you optimized for SEO? Do you have all the keywords that would pull you up? That is going to be such a key feature to make sure you are showing up.
Yeah. How do you feel, Bellamy, about the world of physical bots, right? I know there's not a lot out there right now, but Tesla came up with one that, does the latest dance trend with you, I guess. But, as that expand more, that person can kind of be your caretaker or your cleaner or the person going out there shopping for you. And then maybe reporting back on your phone. It's like, hey, I found this item. What do you think? Which one should I buy? And I feel like that can also be used in a more very targeted way, right? Because they're your eyes now, so they're telling you what's the good product to buy, what's the bad product, right? So there's a lot of things underneath the hood that you can play around with where they're maybe going after brands that they're affiliated with, whoever made that bot, right? So I don't know if that's the future you envision, but I think I've watched too much sci-fi movies in the past.
It is interesting because it comes down to if you're paying for that placement. So, like with Walmart, there's Walmart Connect. Like, are you spending for that placement? Or Amazon, are you spending for that sponsored
Right,
placement?
exactly, right? I'm imagining like Alexa, but in a walking
Right.
bot form.
And I do think it'll be interesting to see how people trust that or distrust that depending on how things evolve, because it will be biased or it will only recommend the top 3 that have
hmm
paid sponsorships.
Yeah, yeah. That's gonna be a very interesting world we're gonna live in. But I just want to mention out there for everyone listening to this podcast, I always say thank you and you're welcome, to any kind of bot that's listening to me, especially Alexa. So, if the overlords ever decide to take over, I'm the polite one. So don't take me out. Cool. So Bellamy, thank you so much for all the insights so far. Right now, we're gonna turn into a little bit more of the financial and tax management insight, right? Audience out there love knowing what keeps a business going, but also how to erase all the headaches of not having Uncle Sam go after them, right? How do you kind of approach managing the financial side of your business?
So I've always been, specifically for me, set aside a pocket to pay for that. So it's almost like the money goes in there and I never see it. And then when I pay for taxes, I know I'm covered in terms of that. And that strategy has worked out well for me, especially now that I've been through a couple years of taxes and making sure that I am covered. I then also just getting a good accountant. I'd say number one, if you're starting your own business, you absolutely need to do that immediately because they can help you figure out what you can write off, what you can use as an expense. Because I think a lot of people don't think about, you almost want expenses to be able to write off against your income. So what can you use as an expense that'll actually help you grow your business? So for example, I hired an assistant recently because it is helping me optimize and do things much faster. And that expense is worth it just because of the amount of growth I'm getting from my business, as well as trips, the e-commerce, the retail expos that I go to, those are also worth it, looking at it as a marketing expense. But 100%, I know this is not my expertise, so I'm hiring someone that knows how to do it.
Just like someone would hire you, right, to help with inventory planning and
Yes.
management. Same concept. Has there any been any key deductions or write off that you learned from your your CPA account over the year or discover yourself since becoming an entrepreneur?
There's ones that I've heard of that I haven't used, but, especially for people in supply chain and operations. So, for example, a lot of startups definitely don't have their operations optimized when it comes to shipping and packaging. So, a colleague of mine that is also in a similar business, but a little bit more in supply chain for CPG, she would actually order products from new companies and then write an email about how much packaging was wasted, how much space was wasted, and everything that they wasted. And that would essentially be her marketing expense because then she'd have a reason to reach out to them and tell them how much money they're wasting on certain things.
That's pretty clever way of getting around that. I love that. What advice would you give to, other businesses or, maybe even your own e-commerce clients out there when it comes to managing their finances effectively? At what point, I think a lot of questions come boil down to this, at what point should they outsource? Or at what point should they, continue to trying to be a one-man show, one-woman show and do it themselves? And is there like a threshold, you would say, either revenue-wise or growth-wise, something that indicates to them like,
For me, I would do it immediately, and I did.
okay,
It was definitely worth the effort because the amount of time you're spending on it is not worth what you should be spending, especially if you're launching a company with a physical good. There are so many other things to worry about that I think it's really important to have a professional do that. And then other advice that a lot of people don't think about is being able to write off a portion of your inventory. Like, I'm going to be honest, the reason why I have a job in inventory management is because planning inventory is very hard. Even with all the AI, even with everything, you're not going to get a perfect allocation. You're not going to get a perfect run. So there's going to be inventory left over. And that inventory left over is not a problem until it's a massive problem. So making sure that you're trying to stay clean in inventory, but also writing off a portion of that inventory every year and taking advantage of that because otherwise it just starts to pile up. Where I have one client, there's like 10 years of inventory because they've never written anything off.
wow.
And so it just becomes a problem not only with your warehouse, if you have a 3PL, that takes up storage. Every time you touch that product, if they've had it for 5 years, just think about how much in the red they are on a contribution basis for that specific product. So definitely take advantage of the write off, but then also think about other ways to utilize your inventory. You can utilize a portion of your inventory as a marketing expense if you are giving it away to
Promotional
influencers or
items. Yep.
things like that to make sure it's not sitting there idle.
That's incredible, Bellamy, coming from you, who's not in a accounting background, to give that kind of write off advice to a lot of the folks out there. So that's amazing. I think a lot of e-commerce owners are gonna be taking notes right now on how they can smartly use, especially inventory that has been sitting there. Like 10 years is incredible, right? That's a lot of wasted inventory fees that they're probably paying out the buffoon right there.
Because when you have the inventory problem, you literally cannot pay to give it away. You will have to pay to have it destroyed. So being clean on inventory is my number one piece of advice. It is so much better to sell out than have overstock because the cost implications of that, your inventory is just tying up your cash.
Absolutely, especially 10 years worth, right? I can't imagine that. That's incredible. I mean, that's worth an inventory audit right now, just in itself. I would like to point out, Bellamy, like I think you kind of alluded to this, but a lot of times businesses, they're so busy, they don't understand what's going on in their business at all, right? Especially if they're a multi-SKU business. If they don't understand on an individual level, are they making money or not on just one item they're selling, right? Or is there any gross margin? Or is it really a loss leader? Right? Where are the winners and losers of your business? Well, kind of clean bookkeeping at a certain level of your business, you're going to lose sight of all of that, right? You're kind of just going along. Hopefully cash comes in and more than cash goes out. And that's really your only metric. And that is not a great long-term view to really have success in this world. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Bellamy, for that insight. Kind of what's next for you and your agency right now? Any exciting plans or project on the horizon?
Yes. So I'm actually creating a course for entrepreneurs that are in consumer goods Usually I work with brands that are doing 20 million and up, but I really wanted to create a resource for the smaller brands that are more founder led, that are doing it all at once, because I am really passionate about not having so much inventory. Like I said, usually it's not a problem until it's a major problem. So really want to give those companies and those founders the resources to be able to set them up for success to scale more effectively.
That's very, very exciting. Is there a launch date you have in mind so we can tease the audience a little bit?
Probably aiming for June.
Oh, okay. Very, very soon. So next month, we can expect something. Awesome.
Yes. So I'm looking at both a self paced class, and then I'm also going to do small cohorts with small groups of founders to one, drive accountability in setting up your processes, but then to also learn from the group and problem solve together.
Great. Well, as a guest of our podcast, we would love to help you promote that. So we'll reach out and ask for that link when it's available in June.
Awesome.
And then just in general, as a final bit, we always ask for final advice from our podcast guests, right? If you can just give one piece of advice to someone just starting the entrepreneurial journey, what would it be? It could be 1, 2, or 3 simple steps to get started, get them off the couch and get them going. We'd love to know your insight on what that could be.
So I definitely say no matter what the business is, just start. And I feel like everyone says that, but having been on the other side and having been hesitant in the beginning, just start. If you think about all the companies today that are massive Fortune 100 companies, those all started as an idea in someone's head. And I think that's really motivating to think about when you're looking at the success of other companies. That was just a little seed in someone's head until they actioned on it. Don't be afraid. I mean, failure can be a big barrier to entry, but you have nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. Just start, right? Just get off the couch and click those buttons and learn. Get all the insights we can from podcasts, from YouTube videos. There's a lot of information out there. It's
Definitely.
about just taking that action, like taking that first step to get
And
things
then
going.
my other piece of advice is know your numbers. Whether you're a consumer goods founder or a consultant, you need to understand your financials to understand one, what you're bringing in, what you're taking home at the end of the day, and if you're profitable, and then hire outside help when you need it. Don't hesitate. So I'd say number one, definitely hire an accountant. I think that can pay you back in spades in terms of the money that you'll get back. And then also the money you'll save and just time spent.
Yeah, and know that when you have 10 years of inventory sitting there, it's time to find someone that understands your inventory situation
But I think
and it
the
can help you
problem
smartly
is
get rid of that.
with an example like that is the company, they didn't know their numbers. So they weren't actually looking at it and quantifying it on a sales to inventory ratio to know that they had 10 years of inventory. They just knew they had a lot of inventory.
And the worst part is, like, the worst news sometimes we deliver to clients is, those who have not done their books for 3 to 4 years. At the end of the day, we're showing them their P&L. They're like, yeah, the amount of money you're actually taking home for profiting, much less than your 9 to 5 job that you're doing previously. And
Right.
that's very disheartening for a lot of folks, right? They're like, hey, they put in a lot of grind to start their business, get it going, probably a lot of late nights, right? Where they have been in bed by 9, right? If they were just doing a 9 to 5 job. But then they realized that because they didn't pay close enough attention to their numbers,
Right.
they were not the overnight success that they were hoping to be, right?
And I mean, most people aren't an overnight success, but that goes back to my non-negotiable of knowing your numbers, because I always say you can't improve upon something unless you know where you stand. So like establishing that benchmark, even if it is ugly, because to be honest, most of the time when I set up with clients, that first benchmarking establishment, it is ugly. But to be honest, they've never looked at their numbers, so they can't improve upon it. And then once you have that benchmark, then you can set goals and get better from there.
Totally understand. Bellamy, that has been some incredible insight that you share with our audience out there. I would like to leave this final minute to give an exciting offer you have for the first 10 listeners out there.
Yes. So for the first 10 listeners, I'll be giving a free inventory audit. So you can understand if you have 10 years of inventory and if you need to do something about it, for consumer-based businesses to understand where you are today and then where you want to scale in terms of your growth plans.
That is very exciting. We'll make sure to throw in the show notes after the show right at the bottom. Yeah, and you guys can see from the progression of this podcast, that is very much needed for a lot of brands out there, right? To know their numbers, understand their inventory. So I would definitely take up that offer that Bellamy just offered. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get a free audit of the situation, especially if you're growing and do not understand where your inventory is at. Bellamy, thank you for coming on the show and being with us today and sharing your wonderful insight with our audience. We hope to see you again, maybe in a year when you can come back and talk about the success of your course.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a fun chat.
Thank you so much. Audience, we're out.